TV in Louisville, August 4th and 5th on C-SPAN 2 and 3. Washington Journal continues.
Congressman Ron Paul, Republican of Texas, serving his 12th term. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
You have a bill that's getting a run-through in the House this week. Tell us about what it would do to audit the Federal Reserve.
Well, it'll do exactly that. We will be once again, or matter of fact, for the first time, be able to audit the Fed. The Fed's never been audited. It's been around for 100 years, and their budget is much, much bigger than the Congress. You know, during the crisis, they generated $15 trillion worth of credit that they loaned out in secret. And the Constitution is very clear. Monetary policy is responsibility of the Congress. Oversight is responsibility of the Congress. But when they tried to clarify what Congress could do in the 1970s, they wrote a law that said, sure, you can audit the Fed except for some very important things like monetary policy and agreements with foreign banks, agreements with foreign and governments and other central banks, and international organizations like the IMF. So my bill merely removes those prohibitions that allows Congress to perform its responsibility, and that is to audit the Fed and get transparency of the Fed. And under these conditions, it has become more important. Matter of fact, the American people are very, very strongly in support of this legislation.
The details, as you mentioned, would require the GAO to audit the Fed's Board of Governors and 12 regional banks. It would require a follow-up report to Congress with recommendations for what to do, and it would have to happen within 1 year.
Right.
Well, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, has some pushback on this. You got to talk with him last week as he testified before Congress. Let's hear what he had to say.
There is, however, one important exception to what the GAO is allowed to audit under current law, and that specifically is monetary policy deliberations and decisions. So what the Audit the Fed bill would do would be to eliminate the exemption for monetary policy deliberations and decisions from the GAO audit. So in effect, what it would do is allow Congress, for example, to ask the GAO to audit a decision taken by the Fed about interest rates, for example. Now that is very concerning because there's a lot of evidence that an independent central bank that makes decisions based strictly on economic considerations and not based on political pressure will deliver lower inflation and better economic results in the longer term. So again, I want to agree with the basic premise that the Federal Reserve should be thoroughly transparent, thoroughly accountable. I will work with everyone here to make sure that that's the case, but I do feel it's a mistake to eliminate the exemption for monetary policy and deliberations, which would effectively, at least to some extent, create a political influence or political dampening effect on the Federal Reserve's policy decisions.
Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke testifying last week. Here's the headline on Reuters. Bernanke slams Ron Paul's Fed audit bill.
Well, I would expect him to, because he wants secrecy. When he talks about independence, he's talking about secrecy. And he talks about politics. I mean, it is a very political organization. What they can do is, he does not want the Congress to have oversight, but he talks to and works with the Treasury Department. He works with the executive branch, but the executive branch doesn't have the authority to manipulate monetary policy either. If he can give loans to private banks and private corporations in secret, how much more political can you get? And then be protected? He says the only thing that we want to have protection on is monetary policy. Well, that's what his business is monetary policy. He's the lender of last resort. He's the bailer out of last resort. He can spend $15 trillion off budget. And he said, well, we need to do this in secret. But the financial crisis has changed all this. I mean, that's ancient history. The Fed has been able to do that from 1913 up until 2008. But now the people want to know. They know how important it is. They're understanding how the Fed creates bubbles and how they claim they can come to the rescue and bail everybody out. And they need total secrecy so that they allow one company to go bankrupt and bail out the other company, bail out some banks, and then have no exposure and keep the information secret. I think that is ancient history. No, we don't have our way. We don't have a total audit. We don't have monetary reform yet, but the handwriting's on the wall. This system can't work. We've had an experiment, especially since 1971, when we went on a worldwide fiat dollar standard. It's never been done in the history of the world to have one single paper standard running the whole financial institutions, and that's coming to an end. I think when they look at the LIBOR scandal, our Fed was colluding with the European central banks in setting interest rates, and our central bank is always setting interest rates. That's their business. That's how they create money. But I think because of the failure of the policy, the transparency of the Fed is going to come, because it's going to become more obvious to everyone that the system cannot be maintained.
We have a tweet that's come in. DFW librarian writes in and says, everyone realizes Congressman Paul's bill won't pass out of the Senate and reach the president's desk, right? So it's last act in last hurrah tour, referring to the fact that you are retiring from Congress. Have you moved the needle on this? Have you gained traction?
Well, I have other people talking about it. I would say yes. It's a big move. It's a big change. I've been talking about it for 30 years, but the last 5 years we've gotten about 100 times more attention than we did for the previous 25.
Why?
So no, it's and this whole idea of downplaying, say, oh, he didn't get him one, and he didn't have monetary reform, and we don't have the full audit. But no, the knowledge is there.
So why has it changed in the last 5 years?
Because of the crisis and the realization that the Fed was responsible, because of education, because of the study of Austrian free market economics. Before, this was not well understood, but it's better understood now than ever before. And I think the other thing that's helped is the younger generation, for some reason, they're fascinated with this idea, and information is so much more available on the internet. And I have young people, I talk to a lot of them, and they're studying this, and it will change. Whether it's going to be changed before I leave Congress or not, most people realize, and I think she's correct, the Senate's going to give us trouble. But the attention keeps growing and growing, the understanding keeps growing. I work as much outside of the Congress, within the Congress, to change people's attitudes and understanding and help educate, because that's what you need first, and then the Congress will respond. And I think that's what's happening right now. The Congress is responding to the people waking up and realizing how important this issue is. Up until now, they always just said whatever the Fed chairman says, we'll go along with it, because they always solve our problems. It's not going to happen for any longer.
We'll go to the phones and hear from Sarah, who's a Republican in Edgewater, Maryland. Good morning.
Good morning. It's such a pleasure having an opportunity to talk to you, Mr. Paul. I'm a very big critic of the Fed, and because of the crisis, I did a lot of reading about it. But what troubles me is that it still seems that a lot of members in Congress don't truly understand the controversy about the Fed, how it was created, what it truly does to undermine the system. What I was wondering is, would you agree with the statement that that America is bankrupt? That would be my first question. And the second one is, it seems that the United States as well as Europe, basically there's no more money to finance anything. And would a new financial system need to be implemented that also would include some form of debt forgiveness on a massive scale? That would be my question. Thank you so much, and it was a pleasure having an opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you. You're right. The country is bankrupt. It has not been declared yet, because the world still trusts our dollars. But we keep printing them, and the foreigners take it, and we buy goods. Yes, and there's going to be monetary reform, and yes, there will be liquidation of debt. The only question is, how does a country liquidate its debt? States and cities can liquidate debt sometimes by writing it off the books. Small countries can write their debt off, but they don't even like to do it. Spain and Greece should just wipe their debt off the books, but instead they're going to keep bailing out and pretending that they can salvage the system. But the ultimate goal of the Federal Reserve and all the monetary authorities is to get rid of the debt by reducing the debt in real terms, and that is just printing money. So if you have a national debt of $15 trillion and you devalue your currency by 50% and prices go up, you've just liquidated $7.5 trillion of real money. But that debt will be liquidated, but eventually the trust will be lost and there will be monetary reform. There has to be reform because countries have done this for centuries where they had to finally restore confidence. But there's no way you can keep confidence going into a system where all you have to do is print more money. This is why Congress is irresponsible, because they always know the Fed is there. If they had to borrow that money in the marketplace, interest rates would go up, and this would all come to an end. So the Federal Reserve provides the incentive for Congress to spend money. Some like to spend money on runaway spending overseas and militarism, and the others like to spend it on welfare, and they sort of get along, and then the Fed prints the money. But it's coming to an end, but exactly when that's going to occur, we don't know. But we are truly an insolvent nation, because if we had to pay all our bills today, it'd be impossible.
A tweet from Wild and Wonderful: if the Fed did not control our monetary policy, it would be in the hands of Congress. Yeah, that's so much more comforting. That's the tweet.
Well, that's an incorrect statement, because when we were under gold standard, the Congress had a responsibility of guaranteeing that the dollar was as good as gold and that the dollar was a stable currency. So no, you don't have to have Congress. You don't want Congress to do it. I wouldn't think Congress might print even more than the Federal Reserve, but they'd bail out different people. They might bail out the mortgage holder and the farmers, where the Fed bails out the big banks and the big corporations and foreign banks and foreign corporations. So it's whose special benefits. So I don't want the Fed to bail out the very super wealthy, and I don't want Congress, to say that we can just print out money and bail out, every mortgage holder. What you want is the market to operate where the interest rates go up by the market, supply money comes into the marketplace, and if people go bankrupt, nobody bails them out. And they just have to write those debt off, and you wouldn't get these huge financial bubbles like the housing bubble and the NASDAQ bubble. That's all a creature of the Federal Reserve's monetary policy.
Gary in Butler, Pennsylvania, Independent Line, welcome.
Yeah, Mr. Paul, it's just it's a shame that you get your rightful media coverage. I just wanted to ask you about the UN Rio Plus 20. That it was in Rio in June, I think, and it talked about an inclusive green economy, and it affects every aspect of our lives as a big country, our lifestyles, behaviors, education, health, consumption, production, agriculture, and it wants to create a international monetary fund. Might be Skinner, or according to a document, efforts need to be made to explore the potential for innovative size of an IMF potential world currency known as special drawing rights, SDR.
Let's get a response, Gary.
I think his concerns are justified, because I think those who manage the world financial system and those who manage our dollar, both nationally and internationally, know exactly what I'm saying, that this is destined to fail. So they're sitting around trying to make plans on what it should be replaced with. And I think they're absolutely right. They want to replace it with an international currency. They'd like to use the IMF. They're interested in world government. I'm interested in not even belonging into the United Nations. I don't want to give up our national sovereignty in any way, and I certainly don't want them to have the currency. So this is the plan that they have, and I don't want our country going to war under UN resolutions or NATO resolutions. I believe in national sovereignty. I believe in our Constitution, and that if we want to influence the world, we should do it by setting a good example, but not allowing international governments, international banks like the IMF do the job that we in the Congress should be doing.
Congressman Ron Paul, Republican of Texas, representing the 14th District. That includes Galveston, Lake Jackson, Victoria, and Freeport, serving his 12th term, also a presidential candidate. Let's go to R.I., a Democratic caller in Blytheville, Arkansas. Hi. R.I., you're on the air. Turn down your TV.
How you doing?
Good. Go ahead. You're on with Congressman Paul.
Yes, I thank you all for what all y'all do for C-SPAN.
Thanks. Please go ahead. All right, we're waiting for you.
I just want to ask Congress Paul.
Yes? All right, state.
Why not Mitt Romney release his tax records?
Okay. Mitt Romney's
Well,
tax
I've made a statement on that, and I think the American people would like to see that happen. And I haven't volunteered to instruct him what he should do. I try to instruct myself what to do. But I think the American people have asked for it, and I've made a statement that it would probably be helpful to him, to let the people know if that's what they want, since he's, the likely nominee for the Republican Party.
Have you spoken with Mitt Romney?
I have off
Recently.
and on over the many months. I've saw him a good bit during the campaign. So
Have you talked to him about endorsing him?
not directly with him.
And do you have a plan for that you're willing to share with us?
No, I have no plan. We still have a convention to go to.
Well, tell us about the convention. We're getting some questions on our Facebook page asking what you're going to be doing in Tampa. Mark asks, will you be speaking at the convention? Whom will you invite to speak if you were scheduling the convention?
Well, I am scheduling a rally before the convention, and that'll be on Sunday. I'll be speaking at that rally. I had to have my own in order to speak. Now, I have not been invited to speak at the National Convention. It doesn't mean I absolutely won't be speaking at the National Convention, but as of now, I have not been invited to speak there.
And who would you like to hear from if Mark had his way and you got to pick the roster of speakers? Who are leaders in the Republican Party you'd like to hear from?
Well, unfortunately, I end up picking a lot of individuals who are probably more academically inclined than politically inclined. But, in our rally that we're having people around the country who have been successful during our campaign, who have become state chairmen, who have become nominees for Senate races that have great potential, and some are in office already. So there's quite a few. It's usually those who have been successful with the same message that I've been talking about, those individuals who believe in personal liberty, a different foreign policy, an understanding of the Federal Reserve, and a market economy. And we put this all together, and there's quite a few. And with the risk of missing somebody, I'll just say there's quite a few, and they can look up the list of people who will be coming to our meeting on the 26th of August.
Here's how a story from USA Today describes the status of your campaign. It says you're no longer actively campaigning for president, but you've not officially suspended your bid. You're still in the running to that degree. Here's the latest GOP convention delegate count that we see from the Associated Press, with Mitt Romney, 1,522 delegates. Congressman Ron Paul, 158. Will you share any more with us about what your plan is at the convention in terms of releasing delegates or sharing your message of what you'd like to see at Tampa come out of the Republican Party?
Well, I look at this a little differently. It's not like I own my delegates. I'm not going to tell them what to do at all. But I would, at the convention, we'll probably clarify the numbers, because the way we count up all our delegates and all our alternates and people who are there that might not be able to vote for me on the first go-around, it's closer to 500. So that's a significant amount of a number of people who will be participating in the process and participating in the platform. So we'll just do what we can to promote what we believe in and what we think Republicans have said they believed in, because for years and years they've argued they believe in limited government, and the group of people that will be attending the Paul conference and our delegates, believe me, they're not looking for bigger government. This country doesn't need bigger government, and Republicans profess that they want less government, but we actually believe in it. We don't want to just cut on the proposed increases, and that's all that's happened for the last 30 or 40 years. Nobody who's in office, it's always tinkering around the edges. We want to change the philosophy of this government. It's the philosophy of liberty, it's the philosophy of the Constitution, and defending everybody's individual rights.
Congressman Ron Paul. Let's hear from Richard, who's a Republican in Corryton, Indiana. Good morning, Richard.
Yes, good morning. Two questions. First, this was all intended for the previous speaker, and I got put on hold till now. First is campaign finance, and the other is morality in campaigning. I want to ask, why is it the cost the huge cost of the media, the press, put into this equation on campaign financing. I'm not talking about news. I'm talking about political analysis of the news. The amount of money contributed by Fox News and the liberal media to this whole campaign business is millions of dollars. That is figured into this equation, and it ought to be.
Okay, let's get a response from Congressman Paul, who's nodding his head.
I think he has a great point, because some people look at this very superficially and they say, why is there so much money, all these donations and all this lobbying effort, millions and millions of dollars? Well, that's because government is too big and the politicians are yielding to the temptation of being influenced by money. But then they come along and they say, well, there's too much money and too many special interests, so therefore we have to write another law and say people can't do that. But his point is, okay, let's say corporations and individuals can't spend a penny. Well, it would go underground. They would spend it one way or the other. But the whole thing is, let's say you take all the corporations out of the money and all the private money out, then you still have the media. Then you have the left wing and the right wing on their news and their corporations. Why should they have a free ride on this? And so I would say that you don't solve the problem by more regulations telling people how to spend their money. You do it by shrinking the size of government. So there's no incentive to go to the auction. That's what government is a big auction, auctioning off all the benefits and all the privileges. And unless you have purity of thought of everybody in Washington, believe me, that problem is going to exist. The answer is going to be the shrinking of government, but just to regulate private financing and then allowing the corporations who run all the TV companies, then they would have free reign.
Preston joins us from New York, on our Independence line. Good morning, Preston.
Good morning, Libby. How are you doing?
Good. Go on right ahead with Congressman Paul.
Hi, Congressman Paul. I want to echo the spirit of that earlier tweet that you had, and I agree with Richard to some extent. Here's what I don't get, Congressman Paul. You want congressional oversight of the Fed, right?
That is correct.
Okay,
Congress.
Sir, Congress is broken. What are you thinking? It's so locked up by politics that it's almost completely dysfunctional. I don't get it. I'll tell you what, I will accept that Congress can have oversight of the Fed when
Right.
Congress can get its act together. The first thing Congress should be concentrating on is on something like more realistic, like lobbying reform or campaign finance reform. That's far more realistic and doable even in this ridiculous environment we have now. I think it's more important. Why don't you try something radical by like working with Jack Abramoff or something. Team up with that guy who seems to have really turned his life around and is really focused on lobbying, and nobody knows it better than he does. Why don't you take the lead on something like this? You're just not going to get this oversight of the Fed through, sir.
Oh, well, I think you're finding an excuse to duck the issue. Yes, I think Congress does have a lot of shortcomings, but if you're going to straighten out Congress, just straighten them up and have them do their responsibility. Matter of fact, the GAO is one of the few agencies of government that has a half-decent reputation. So I would say that's your best goal. I mean, you don't have the members of Congress actually doing it. What you have is a GAO doing an audit and giving this information. So just to say because Congress is inept, sure, they've been inept for 100 years on monetary policy. That doesn't mean we should say, oh, we can't do it. We'll just let them go ahead and do this. No, for forever and ever. So yes, they do have shortcomings, but I believe that you don't just renege on your responsibility because you can't get good results.
David, Democrats line, Birmingham, Alabama. Good morning.
Well, good morning. Mr. Paul, I find you rather disingenuous. You drop Social Security, but you're against Social Security programs. Also, you are against the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But another thing I would like to say, what you were saying, I found out that you also have a lot of money invested in gold. So basically what you people are doing, you are looking out for your own interests. The United States is not bankrupt. It can print money anytime it wants to. It's different from Greece and the Eurozone. The Eurozone is invested. Also, the price of gold has nothing to do with the dollar. The dollar is based on oil, the price of a barrel of oil, which is being manipulated by China because China has previously has contracts where it has a fixed price on a barrel of oil, such as $20. When the price rises, it stays at that price. This is the difference. Thank you.
What is this question?
So, brought up the Civil Rights Act, your support or disapproval of that?
Well, he doesn't have the full story. The Civil Rights Act is basically very good, but it also undermined a very important principle in a free society, and that has to do with property rights. So the real problems in the when we had the civil rights crisis was the fact that Jim Crow laws, and they should all have been abolished, because it's always government that gives us our problem in our race relations. I mean, just look at how the drug laws now are enforced. They're very, very biased against minorities, and I'm against this drug war, but if you really want to have fairness and civil liberties, you have to deal with the drug war. And why is the way out of proportion the people who are arrested and put into prison are minorities with drugs, way out of proportion on the use of drugs. But when you look at the problems, the government is basically the problem, even with the racial problem. First, it endorsed and legalized slavery, and then it comes along, and it was the Jim Crow laws that provided the integration. Who was the biggest segregation? It was our military up until after World War II. So all I want to do is get rid of the government, get out of the way when they create these problems of racism. But you can't do this by invading somebody's private property and say, we're going to tell you what you can do in your own houses, what you can do with your own liberty. So you do not throw out all property rights in doing this. You throw out all the bad laws and the protection that has been given. But this whole idea about gold and all, gold is something that is in the Constitution. It's never been repealed. It says only gold and silver can be legal tender. So say that I'm somehow unpatriotic or distant. He sort of likes the system. He thinks he's going to help poor people. But he's the one, this attitude is the one that bails out the big banks. These are the ones that gave $15 trillion. And the middle class lost their jobs and they lost their houses. So if you care about the middle class, if you care about poor people, you got to understand the monetary policy. You don't want a system that bails out the world, bails out the banks, and bails out the military-industrial complex. That's who gets all the money. So I think a little bit more investigation would reveal a great deal of enlightenment for people who have those attitudes.
Our caller also brought up Social Security and whether or not you support it and yet draw upon it.
No, I wouldn't have voted for Social Security, and I offer young people a chance to get out. I think people should, and young people want to get out because they know it's a bad deal. And people who have paid into it, it's their money. It was put in, it was supposed to be returned to them at a certain age. It wasn't an income tax. So if you want to take some of your own money back, I don't see any problem with that. The system, though, is not a workable system. We'll come to end. That's why I would like to see young people be able to opt out of it. And that is my argument. And I think that it's nothing more than getting your own money back that was promised to people who was on that paid into the Social Security system for a long, long time.
Since our caller brought up the Civil Rights Act and you responded to that, here's a story from Huffington Post earlier this year. You said that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 destroyed privacy, and your criticisms of that.
That's what I was talking about on private property rights. I mean,
is this a symbolic issue, though, that gets you into hot water because of the legacy the Civil Rights Act has left?
But it's the principle and consistency that gets me into the very good position that I'm in, where people respect me and they know that I will argue consistently for the cause of liberty and for the Constitution. So every time people turn around and say, during the campaign we'll say, Ron, we love what you're doing. This would be a conservative Republican. We love what you're doing. You're such a good fiscal conservative. But, you could really get somewhere if you would just drop this idea that you shouldn't go to war unless you have a declaration. We want you to be more militant. And they said, if you just have me change your foreign policy. And I said, well, the consistent argument is that you defend markets, you defend civil liberties, and you defend the Constitution. You don't go to war and tell other countries how to live. So it was this very issue that people claim was hurting me is the reason that people will come out to the tune of 6,000 and 8,000 people on college campuses, because they know that I'm not going to send these young people off to war or tax them forever or run up the debt to fight wars that are undeclared, unwinnable, and just look at all the countries that we're in. That's why they want somebody to take a consistent viewpoint, and for some reason, delightfully so, the young people seem to respect that.
Let's hear from Richard, a Republican caller in Middletown, New York. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, sir. Mr. Paul, I want to thank you for your service as a veteran and as a doctor. I'm a veteran. I was involved in a radioactive cleanup at Eniwetok Atoll, Marshall Islands. Now, I got a question and a comment. You know, everybody knows that the Federal Reserve is as federal as Federal Express, and I thank you, and I'm watching your bill on the Hill there for the audit, and I've been following you on the Daily Paul and on Alex Jones's InfoWars, and also Adam Kokesh, Veterans for Ron Paul. We know that you got more donations than the president and all the other candidates combined from veterans and military. And I was wondering if you're going to be able to speak you're going to have the Paul Fest, and I'd like to be down there, and you know, there ain't no difference between Romney and Obama. You know, they're all bought and paid for by the same people. You're the last, I think, honest man on Capitol Hill. I appreciate what you do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I will be speaking at the rally that I'm putting together on Sunday, which is on the 26th, 6th of August. But your point is well taken about the military. The top 4 categories of donations come from the Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force. So those are my top donations. And I've been in the military, and he's right. I got more money than everybody else put together. Because the accusation here in Washington is if you don't vote for the war, if you don't vote for more money, and if you don't vote to endorse the policies that got us into war, for some reason you're un-American, you're unpatriotic, and you don't care about the troops. But the litmus test is, where are the troops? And I was in the military for 5 years in the 60s, and believe me, I wasn't looking forward to the expansion of the Vietnam War and the prolongation of the Vietnam War. Made no sense whatsoever. So, and that's the way the military people are. People join the military for good reasons. They believe in the country. They believe we should have a strong national defense. They join the Guard units. They join our reserves. They didn't join that so that they could go and have 3 or 4 or 5, 6 tours of duty to the Middle East and not even know while they're there, fighting a war that was undeclared and never knowing when it's going to end. And this is something that the young people, not only the ones who are in the military, but the ones who are inheriting this mess, are very much opposed to.
Tom, independent caller, Lawrence, Kansas. Welcome.
Thank you. Dr. Paul, I honor your commitment to rooting out the criminal currency cartel that fronts through the Federal Reserve and its high treason finance that weaponizes against the American people and the people of the planet. And I would like to ask you to straighten out your record in terms of foreign policy, because in many ways I honor what I see as your non-interventionist foreign policy, which should actually be called a do-no-harm foreign policy. But as we know, every single war that is started by the United States of America is done through fraudulent and deceptive initiating events. And so this era, it was September 11th. And you took an oath to honor the Constitution. That includes against domestic enemies. And under Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution, it's clear that the fraudulent nature of the September 11th attacks are treason, and it goes to the bowels of our national security complex and to the Likud operatives who have infested many of the high positions in the Pentagon, and that would include people like Michael Chertoff, who...
Let's get a response from Congressman Paul. Do you think that 9/11 was a domestic event, as our caller is claiming?
No, I don't believe that, but I don't believe the commission helped us. I believe the commissions, whether they're assassination commissions, you know, the Kennedy Assassination Commission, or whether it's the commission, 9/11 Commission, I don't think they're set up to get information and really settle this. I mean, he has strong beliefs, and I am morally, you know, I don't have the information to get to the point where he is. But I am at a point where I don't trust commissions, because who was punished? What about the individual, say the FBI agent that reported numerous times, if not dozens of times, that why are these people learning to fly airplanes but not land airplanes? And he kept saying there's something suspicious of this. It was totally ignored. But nobody goes through with this and finds out, well, why was nobody punished? Sometimes individuals, when this is pointed out, they get promotions. So our big problem is depending on some of these commissions to sort it all out. But I think his point about going to war under false pretense is a pretty good one, whether it was the Spanish-American War and even the misinformation on what happened prior to the Pearl Harbor attack, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, this whole idea and all the gross distortions about why Saddam Hussein was about ready to launch a nuclear weapon at us and justified us going in there. And I think one of his points was, 9/11 occurred. I voted for the authority to go after those responsible, but Iraq had nothing to do with it. And that's where we concentrated for 10 years. Loss of life, loss of, it's probably a million citizens in Iraq over the last 20 years or so was a result of our intervention over there. And now, total chaos. Just listen to the news this morning. More killing going on in weeks in Iraq. Now Iraq is aligned with the Iranians. It's such a foolish foreign policy. And they go to war under false pretense, they tell stories, and my idea is follow the Constitution, don't go to war unless there's a declaration of war and it's up front and the Congress supports it and the people support it. Then we know why we're there, we know what we're fighting, we'll know when it's over, instead of these delayed 10 and 20 years of involvement around the world.
Congressman Ron Paul, Republican of Texas, representing the 14th District. He's been running for president, although no longer actively campaigning, has not officially suspended his bid. His past includes a Libertarian Party nomination for president back in 1988. He also served as an Air Force flight surgeon. He served in the U.S. House. He's a doctor and served in the military, as he mentioned, in the Air Force and the Air National Guard. We have a Democratic caller, a Libertarian more specifically, on the line now from Gladstone, New Jersey. Chris joins us. Hi, Chris.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Just want to start off by saying how much we appreciate what you do, Dr. Paul. I was one of the few who was soaked standing in Philadelphia watching you right by the Liberty Bell. It was a magical day. Just wanted to ask you about the economics of the drug policy. I heard you touch on it earlier, but it seems as if it's an issue that is almost under talked about, and definitely want to hear that explained so more people can understand it from an economic point of view.
Very good, because there's not enough attention paid to it. I do talk about it at times, but maybe not enough. But it is a big economic issue. Since the 1970s, this modern day war on drugs, we've spent literally trillions of dollars, $3 to $4 trillion, which adds up to the debt. Has accomplished nothing. Prohibition doesn't work. It's actually, the war on drugs is a lot worse than the prohibition of alcohol. The people who endorse the drug war are the drug dealers and some people who are misled into believing that it's a moral issue and that you can make people moral and be better behaved by having these laws. But there are other economic issues other than the debt involved, because there are other special interests. If you take the drug marijuana, the one group of people who really don't want it legalized are the people who sell alcohol, because actually alcohol is a much more dangerous drug than marijuana, and what if people were able to use that and not buy as much alcohol? So they have a special interest. Also, the drug companies, they're selling these pain medications and all kinds of medications for all kinds of things. If marijuana were legalized, maybe you would have a lot less. Think of the people who might be helped that are dying with cancer and can't take anything else and can't eat. So my issue is not so much to defend the drugs and defend the marijuana, but government messes things up. It costs a lot of money, and besides, it's your body, it's your life. You can drink alcohol if you want, except if you're 18 and you have to go over and get killed fighting overseas, you're not allowed to drink alcohol. That's how bizarre it is. But it is a big economic issue. It's a personal liberty issue as well.
Walnut Creek, California. Jenny, Republican caller. Good morning.
Good morning.
Please go ahead. You're on with Congressman Paul.
Yes, Dr. Paul, good morning. I appreciate that, Dr. Paul. You have outstanding mission for the country, and I have a very simple question. I understand correctly your mission if that Federal Reserve has override the proceeding of all the policy in central bank globally in currency in terms of monetary. But why could not bail out the United States as a way of the wholly domestic policy, entitlement programs, as well as no strategy foundation that will get us out of the debt? That's my question. I appreciate it.
Well, the Federal Reserve has a lot to do with the debt. If you didn't have a Federal Reserve, the debt would be self-limiting. Federal Reserve I call an enabler. It enables Congress to spend and not be responsible. So if they want to fight wars, it's fought through inflating the currency and printing the money. If you love welfare benefits for everybody and there's no limits, then you'll like the Fed, because the debts can be run up, and look at where we are today, but there's still, interest rates are low because the Fed is printing money like crazy. The only problem with this is that that debt is unsustainable, and that's why the markets are rocky right now, and worldwide it's a phenomenon. We're doing a little bit better than the rest because other countries are doing so badly, you know, compared to Greece and Spain. We look pretty good, but the debt is run up because there's a strong appetite for the American people, you know, to keep fighting and putting these troops overseas, and a strong appetite. You can't allow anybody not to have a check come from the government. So more than about half the people in the country now live off the other half, and they get checks from the government. So that inevitably will run up the debt, inevitably will cause the big crash that will be very, very devastating to all of us.
We'll go to Harbor Springs, Georgia, where Al is an independent caller. Good morning.
Hello.
Hi, Al.
Hi. I just wanted to let Dr. Paul know that I really appreciate him. You know, I've watched him over the years, listened to him over the years, and he's real consistent. And you know, he was the best candidate that we had, and people just don't realize that. I'd also like to point out to Dr. Paul that maybe a lot of African Americans and a lot of the Hispanics would probably vote for him if he would have been an independent. I think just because he's a Republican, I think that holds him back as far as those two camps are concerned. And I'd also like to say that the issue with the currency that people don't really seem to get is that the Federal Reserve really seems to own the currency. From what I can tell, the United States doesn't even own the currency anymore. The Fed is a private corporation, and when they print that money, they loan it to the government at interest, which we pay through our income tax. And I think that's something that people just miss. They don't really understand that. And if Dr. Paul might be able to, you know, shed some light on that for people, I think they'd start scratching their heads and trying to understand exactly what's going on here. Because if we own the currency, why are we paying the Federal Reserve at interest?
I think it's a pretty good point, and it is a payment has to be done, and it is paid for mostly by middle class and the poor, because they print the money, and you suggested where does it go? It goes to the government, and it goes for government programs. It goes to big corporations and big banks. People who get the counterfeit money. This is literally morally a counterfeit money. So if you get to spend it into the economy, you get a better deal than if you end up holding the money 1, 2, 3, 4 years later when the money loses its value. So this is why people on fixed incomes, people who get Social Security and they live on this, their standard of living is going down. So it's very, very unfair. The monetary system we have today inevitably destroys the middle class and enhances the rich. So we do have a 1% problem. The 1% is not because they've earned the money, but because they've had special benefits from the government. And you're right about appealing to minorities. It is more difficult in the Republican Party. I tried to change that, but I keep thinking about one time when I brought up the subject of the drug war being unfair to minorities, and I believe that was one of the nights I got booed. One thing is I probably got booed more than any other candidate in the Republican Party, because another time I made this radical proposal that we have a foreign policy based on the golden rule, that we shouldn't do anything to any other country that we wouldn't have them do to us. But it turns out that I do know that I get a lot stronger support from minorities, black and Hispanics and others, on the foreign policy issue. And I think it's because the draft has been unfair to minorities in the past, and even today, minorities sometimes are forced into the military because of economic reasons, and they end up carrying an unfair burden as well. So they like the idea of foreign policy and also on the drug policy.
Congressman Paul, 2 questions on Twitter. Anna asks, if you are not nominated to be the president, what are your plans for the future? And then another question, would you consider any cabinet positions if not elected president? Which ones?
I'm not considering it because I'm not expecting that I would be offered anything. That would be a pretty big surprise. No,
Federal Reserve Chairman?
No, I don't think they'll offer that to me. No, that's not going to happen. But I'll probably continue to do exactly what I'm doing. I've been very interested in promoting ideas of personal liberty, sound economic policy, and a different foreign policy since the early 1970s. Politics were it was really an aside. I did that without expectations that I would ever be in politics, only a vehicle to talk about these issues. So I'll continue to do it. Campaigning for liberty is what I've spent my life doing. Even those years I was in Congress, I dropped out for 12 years and went back to medicine. So I'll continue to do this because I think it's really this whole issue of liberty and liberty government is, to me, just coming alive right now. So I'm really excited about what's happening. Not what's happening over on the Hill. We're getting there, but the country is waking up, especially the younger generation, and I'm excited about that.
Congressman Ron Paul, Republican of Texas, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Coming up next, we'll talk with Richard Ravitch about the state budget crisis.